Is it reasonable, rational to believe that God exists? Can our culture survive or thrive without believing in God, morals, truth? And is there evidence to persuade people that God is real and the Bible is true? We're going to look at these things and more on this edition of Truth for a New Generation. In 1931, the famed historian Will Durant sent a letter out to numerous colleagues, intellects, academics around the world, and he asked this question. Very interesting the way he worded it. Durant appealed to his fellow academics, and he said, quote, "Spare me a moment and tell me what meaning life has for you. What keeps you going? What help, if any, does religion give you? What are the sources of your inspiration and your energy? What is the goal or motive force of your toil? Where do you find consolations in your happiness? Where, in the last resort, does your treasure lie?" Now, this is a fascinating question. Now, Durant was a man that had accolades. He wrote the multi-volume set, History of Civilization, and in his lifetime, he was given the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and his work in history has been called one of the most important historical works ever in all of history. And yet, he was asking the question, what is the meaning of life? Now, the answers he received from the luminaries in the 1930s varied, and they became a book called On the Meaning of Life. Now, Durant offered his own thoughts about this, and at this season of his life, they were really fairly pessimistic. And he wrote this, quote, "The growth and spread of knowledge for which many idealists and reformers prayed has resulted in a disillusionment which has almost broken the spirit of our race," end of quote. Now, later on, Durant would find a relationship with God before he died. That's very exciting. But today, I want to talk about where we are, because secularism has really caused so many people to view life with a sense of hopelessness. And especially in the younger generations, and our nation, which was built on liberty, but not completely unrestrained freedom. I call it a principled liberty. Today, so many people, because there's not this ultimate foundation for life and meaning and purpose and fulfillment, people assume the road to happiness, whatever that might be, is just unrestrained freedom, no accountability, no boundaries. And 10 years ago, I said that the worldview of many young people is really sexual license. Today, I would say for many, without Christ, without God, it's just license. I can do anything I want to do, no boundaries. And sadly, though, as suicide is on the rise and drug use and overdoses cause the death of so many young people, this life without God, without boundaries, at first it seems appealing to tell myself I have permission to do anything and everything that I want. Sadly, that secularistic, nihilistic, relativistic, hedonistic worldview leaves many people empty, as Durant was at that point in his life. And so accountability is something that all of us have to own up to and face up to, accountability to God. Now, there was a recent survey by the Barna Research Group. We've interviewed George Barna. They're out of Ventura, California. Barna and his colleagues, sociologists of religion, really, their research has been just widely acknowledged as being very accurate and, in fact, very prophetic. Now, working in partnership with the 360 Institute, they looked at Generation Z, and they said this, quote, "Gen Zers are drawn to things spiritual, but with a vastly different starting point from previous generations, many of whom received a basic education in the Bible and Christianity." Now, a vastly different starting point. Okay, our grandparents' parents, frankly, my generation, I'm a baby boomer. I was on the tail end of the baby boomers, but we believed in God, morality, a binary view. There's right and there's wrong. There's true, there's false. There's good, there's bad. But today, ideas of morality, ideas of the meaning of life, the purpose of life, ideas of God, even ideas about what it means to be a human being, very fluid, where, as one writer said, lost at sea, adrift from the solid ground of God and truth with no island of respite in sight. So it's important to talk about, does God exist? Because look, this is not just the ground of the theologians and philosophers. This is not just some ivory tower discussion like how many angels could dance on the head of a pin that they talked about in the Middle Ages. The decision we make about God and truth and the purpose of life, it influences ourselves, it influences our nation, it will shape our future. Stay tuned with more Truth for a New Generation.
I just returned from a conference at the Cove, and it was absolutely breathtaking in every way. The mountain views, the tranquil areas within the woods, and just being alone with God. Mornings spent watching the sunrise from a rocking chair with coffee in one hand and my Bible in the other. Evenings spent reflecting on the incredible spiritual teaching. It's the embodiment of peacefulness. Come and experience the Cove for yourself.
Welcome back to Truth for a New Generation. Alex McFarland here. You know, when we're talking about the subject of is it reasonable to believe that God exists, I can think of no better person to have a conversation with about this subject than the man you're about to meet, Dr. Frank Turek. Nearly 20 years ago, he was the co-author of, seriously, one of the most important apologetics books I think of my lifetime. It was called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, co-written with the late Norm Geisler, a very influential apologist in both of our lives. But I'm so honored for what I hope is only the first of many, many visits. Colleague and friend and world-class apologist, Dr. Frank Turek. Welcome to the program.
The great Alex McFarland. It's always wonderful being with you, my friend. How are you?
Well, I'm doing great. And, you know, I want to say this as we film this. Today's your birthday, so happy birthday, Frank Turek.
Hey, thanks, brother. 59 years old. I know I don't look a day over 58, but I'm 59, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, hey, man, you're just in your prime. But hey, I got to ask you this. You know, you and I both had the privilege of knowing, working with, writing with Norm Geisler. Was Dr. Geisler your introduction really to apologetics?
Well, actually, the first books I read were from another guest you're having on soon. I know Josh McDowell. I came to faith by reading Evidence Demands a Verdict and More Than a Carpenter. But then the man I learned the most from was Dr. Geisler, because we moved to Charlotte in 1993 to attend the seminary, Southern Evangelical Seminary here. And following him, you were the president of the seminary. And that's where I learned most of what I know today about the evidence for Christianity.
You know, Frank, I want to thank you. I want to talk about the evidence for Christianity, but I well remember back in 2004, you and I were at Focus on the Family. I was director of apologetics at Focus on the Family, and there was yourself, Josh McDowell, Lee Strobel, Gary Habermas, John Ankerberg, Del Tackett of the Truth Project, and we had a radio show with Dr. Dobson, and you were very kind. We're all sitting around the table, and it was kind of awkward. Nobody knew what to say. Erwin Lutzer was there. I forgot about that too, and you said some very nice things that really led Dr. Dobson and Focus to continue investing in apologetics and allowing me to do many, many things. But wouldn't you say that for the last 15, 16 years, there has really been in American life just this renewed emphasis on worldview and apologetics? And that was kind of a little bit of a milestone there, getting all those people together, and the momentum has carried on ever since, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, there's a big apologetics conference here in Charlotte every October, and the school's still going strong. Evidence is important, especially in a day and age where you're bombarded with so much information. Just, on the internet, on your iPhone, everywhere, you can find evidence or a lot of misinformation about anything. So if we really want to make a case that Christianity is true, we have to be very skilled at providing the evidence and showing people where they can find it. That's what we try and do. That's what you try and do. So thanks for doing this program.
Well, let me ask you this. If you had to summarize and say, okay, what is, in your opinion, Dr. Frank Turek, the most compelling reason to believe that God exists, what would you cite as the most persuasive evidence?
Well, there are three arguments I normally give: the argument from the beginning of the universe, the argument from the design of the universe and the design of life, and third, the moral argument. Because, Alex, if there is no God, then quite obviously nothing's ultimately right or wrong. Everything's a matter of opinion. And we know that certain things really are right and other things really are wrong. The Holocaust was really wrong. Loving people is really right. If that's the case, God exists. And by the way, when you put those three arguments together, the beginning of the universe, the design of the universe and the design of life, and the moral argument, you get a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, moral, personal, intelligent creator who created all things and sustains all things. And you don't need to get any of that information from the Bible. You can get that information from what we call natural theology, from creation, from conscience. We can know that there's a theistic God out there. And that it doesn't mean this is the God of Christianity. It could be the God of Christianity, but I find it very interesting, and college audiences often find it interesting because that's where we go to present this evidence, that without the Bible, you can show there's a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, moral, personal, intelligent creator who created and sustains all things.
Now, when you say a theistic God, what does that mean, theistic?
It means a being beyond the world who created and sustains the world. As I mentioned, the spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, moral, personal, intelligent creator who created and sustains all things and whose every attribute is infinite. And I think you can arrive at that being, as I said, without any reference to the Bible. You can arrive at that being from just looking at philosophy, from science, from history. You can show that this being actually exists.
I was talking to a teenager about a week ago. I was in Orlando, Florida, and this young man had a great conversation, but he kind of led off in defense of his agnosticism by saying, I believe in science. How do you begin to share Christ with somebody who presents by saying, either science or God?
Well, the question is, what do you mean by science? I would just ask that question. What do you mean by it? Because science, according to their definition, is finding cause and effect inside the space-time continuum. In other words, inside the universe. Well, if that's what science is, then how can science tell you whether or not a being outside the universe created the universe and intervenes in it from time to time? Science, if it's defined as just cause and effect inside the universe, should have nothing to say about a being outside the universe who created the space-time continuum, created these natural laws that we can use to try and discover cause and effect, and created our mind so we can really know what the real world is out there. In other words, I think science actually is better explained by a theistic God, by a being who created and sustains this orderly world. In fact, quite frequently, Alex, I ask people this. I ask them when they say, well, I'm just for the scientific evidence. I often ask them this question: why is there evidence for anything? In other words, why is there a rational world that we can reliably find cause and effect? And why are these laws of nature created? And why are they sustained? Why are they so precise? And why can our minds ascertain truths about the real world outside of our minds, this cause and effect that is often described by these laws of nature? It would seem to be that this is best explained by a mind who created the world and sustains the world, sustains these natural laws, so we can actually know what goes on outside of our minds. In other words, the very reason that there's evidence for anything basically presupposes a being like God who created and sustains all this. So as soon as they start calling for evidence, I'm going to say, wait a minute, why is there evidence for anything? Why can we reason? Why can we know right and wrong? All these issues, I think, are best explained by God.
Absolutely. Thomas Aquinas said, if anything is true, then truth exists. I mean, the mere fact that it's an intelligible world, that there is truth and we can know it, ultimately this does speak to God, doesn't it?
Yeah, now, as I said earlier, it doesn't necessarily prove the Christian God, but it seems to show that that Christianity could be true, and a theistic God better explains the universe than does atheism, than no God at all. In fact, to show that the spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, moral, personal, intelligent being that we can get from natural revelation is the Christian God. We then just have to look at history, Alex, and see if Jesus rose from the dead. Because if he really did rise from the dead, that means that Christianity is true. Look, I just have a personal policy. If somebody rises from the dead, I just trust whatever the guy says. And Jesus actually affirmed the Old Testament. He promised the New Testament. So if Jesus rose from the dead, then Christianity's true.
Exactly. Frank, 2 years ago this month, I had the privilege of speaking at a medical school in the Midwest. It was a secular university, and there was a panel discussion on what does it mean to be a human being. And the topic of transgenderism came up, and I purposely quoted a number of scientists on the differences, the anatomical differences between male and female. And the medical students, I was in front of about 400 medical students, many of whom argued for gender fluidity and that male and female were just artificial social constructs. So here's my point. We're living in an age when, for many, feelings trump science. Even medical students, some of whom were reluctant to say that male and female are objective different states of human physiology. Here's my question. How do we begin to present truth and do apologetics in an age when feelings trump much evidence, but for many, feelings even trump science?
Yeah, what I would say to them is, first of all, transgenderism presupposes fixed genders. Why? Because in order, if I'm a man and I want to say to myself, well, I really think I'm a woman inside, I have to have some idea of what a man is and some idea of what a woman is in order to even make that assessment, right? If I'm going to transition myself from a man to a woman, that presupposes males and females. So transgenderism presupposes all this, and yet they try and deny it at the same time. This is, by the way, why, Alex, as you've probably seen, there's a bit of an eternal war going on in the LGBT community. The eternal war is going on because if the T people have it their way to say that gender is fluid, that means the L, the G, and the B have just been erased because there's no such thing as lesbianism or gay or bisexual if there are no genders, because all of those things presuppose genders. I mean, if you're going to have a homosexual relationship, you're presupposing you know what the same sex is, right? How can you have same-sex marriage if you don't know what the sexes are? So there's no rationality behind this movement. It's internally contradictory. Now, if people want to continually close their eyes to science and close their eyes to the reality of male and female, there's not much you can do for that other than pray, because they're suppressing what they know is true right in front of them. But it might be helpful on occasion to say, well, if someone is a man and they want to transition to becoming a woman, how can they do that unless they know what a man and a woman are?
Sure. Hey, I've got one or two more questions, but before we go too much farther, how can people find you on the web, Frank?
Yeah, we're at crossexamine.org. That's crossexamine with a D on the end of it.org. We're also on the NRBTV network that this program airs on. We're on Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern. And we have a show called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. We also have a radio show podcast by the same name. And we have an app. So, but the place to get all this is crossexamined.org, crossexamined with a D on the end of it.
Frank, in a culture where people are so much driven by feelings, what's the place nowadays of evidential apologetics?
Well, I think actually, I know that the world is motivated quite a bit by feelings, but I think generally on the college campus, even today, it's more modern than postmodern, Alex. What I mean by that is people still look for evidence. You don't go to the engineering department and say, well, you want to put up that building any way you want, it's just fine. You don't have to obey the laws of physics. They go, no, you got to obey the laws of physics to do this. It's actually interesting. In the hard sciences, they're modern. They realize there's objective laws that you have to obey, and if you're gonna live a healthy life. It's in places like the English department, they start doubting there's truth. They say it's true, Alex, that there is no truth. Now, this, of course, is logically self-defeating, as you well know.
I know that I can't know.
Yeah. So, we just try and point that out on a college campus. So despite the fact that, sure, there is this kind of zeitgeist out there that, everything's fluid, in reality, when they build a house or when they build a bridge or when they go to the doctor for medicine, they realize that there are objective truths out there and they can be known.
Yeah. Hey, the book that you wrote, and you've written many. In fact, one of the ones I love to recommend to people is your book, Legislating Morality. But that famous book, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. In closing, what did you mean by that title? You don't have enough faith. I thought atheists didn't have faith.
Yeah, well, we're using faith in the sense the atheists use faith. This is not the biblical definition. The biblical definition of faith is trusting in what you have good evidence to believe. But atheists like Richard Dawkins would say, if you don't have evidence, you have faith. So what we're saying, Dr. Geisler and I were saying, is actually the view that has the most faith by that definition of faith, blind faith, is atheism. Because there's very good evidence that Christianity is true. So in order to be an atheist, you have to have a lot of faith. You have to overlook all this evidence, and you have to have a lot of blind faith in order to say that there is no God.
Hey, we got to pull away right now. Dr. Frank Turek, thanks so much for being on, and we look forward to talking with you again soon.
My pleasure, brother. Thanks for being with me, or for me being with you, Alex. God bless you.
God bless you. We'll be back with more of Truth for a New Generation.
My beliefs aren't exactly popular.
You can tell me I'm on the wrong side of history all you want, but you won't change my mind.
That's because I'm standing on something that doesn't change.
Therefore, let us hold fast to the confession of our hope without wavering.
For he who promised is faithful.
As Christians, it's important to remember that no matter how good or bad things may seem, nothing changes our King or our call.
Hi, welcome back. Alex McFarland here, and I want to again thank Frank Turek for that great conversation. You know, it's been such a blessing to be involved in apologetics now for more than 25 years and to meet great colleagues like that. And, you know, what's so interesting, I think, is not only the fact that there are many colorful individuals, interesting, intelligent people that are researching, writing, defending the faith, but the fact that the evidence is available to everybody. Psalm 19, one of our favorite passages in the Old Testament, says, "The heavens and earth declare the glory of God," or bear witness to the glory of God. Demonstrate, to tangibly show. Creation must have had a creator. Conscience, the moral law written on our heart, comes from a moral lawgiver. And Psalm 19, verse 3 says, "There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard." The voice of creation and our knowledge of truth and our moral conscience and Scripture and Jesus. I mean, all of these things in general and specific ways, generally to the specific. They cry out that God exists, a designer, a creator, and yes, a maker of humanity that we're all personally accountable to. And everybody deep down knows this. You know, I've interviewed dozens of atheists over the years for my two books, 10 Answers for Atheists, 10 Answers for Skeptics. And even atheists have said to me that they pray. Even atheists that will debate me, deny that God exists, there is no God, for a myriad of reasons, they say. And then off stage, off camera, I've had a number of atheists say, "Please pray for me for this or that issue," which of course we're honored to do. But the fact is that I believe Turek and Geisler were right. I mean, if you believe there is no God, if you believe life has no meaning, it's all happenstance, or if you just try to push it out of your mind and say, "I don't want to think about it, I'll deal with this later." No, surely you're wiser than that. You don't want to procrastinate and just push God out of your mind. Look, we know that chaos is not the mother of order. We know that something doesn't come from nothing. We know that design and order and specificity doesn't come about by accident. And deep down, I believe Psalm 19 is right. We know that this inherent knowledge of right and wrong, the law written on our soul, our psyche, our heart, the moral law must have come from a lawgiver. There are natural laws, and laws don't come about unless there is some intelligent source behind them. In fact, I've read many journals, I've interviewed many scientists who said the order, just the complexity of the human DNA, the precision with which the solar system operates, humanity, it's amazing. Just all of life, biological life, aquatic life, so much of the design of the universe Many scientists have said to me that it appears there is some type of mind or super intellect behind the universe and its operation. Well, scholars use the word omniscience, that God has all knowledge. God has omnipotence, all power. And I would say this, friend, a God that loves you and a God that is calling out to you even right now. God is omnibenevolent. What does that mean? It means all good. That's why the psalmist, after delineating many of the evidences for God, the psalmist says, may the words of my mouth, the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O God, the God who is real and the God who we hope you have a relationship with.
What is truth?
What is truth? Shabam! There it is, the big kahuna, the spicy enchilada, the fizzy lifting drink.
The claim God exists is not a subjective claim.
This is not an evidence problem.
So, like, truth is basically subjective.
Yeah, emotional.
This is Debunk TV.
Hi, welcome back. Thanks for watching. And, you know, as we consider these things, I urge you to read my new book, The Assault on America. I talk about the beliefs that got us where we are and a realistic pathway back. A lot of inspiring history about the country and how the founders really did have God and morality in view. The book, The Assault on America, How to Defend Our Nation Before It's Too Late. It's available online, Amazon.com, all the major booksellers, every Barnes & Noble in America. Please read The Assault on America. And let me say this too. These ministries, our events, our broadcasting, publishing, we couldn't do what we do. For 23 years, we couldn't have done it without support from great friends like you. Would you be a partner with Truth for a New Generation Television? For your gift of at least $50, I'm going to send you the award-winning curriculum, the 21 toughest questions your children will ask about God, to impart biblical values to kids 5 to 13, and maybe even to do a little remedial work and help mom and dad get a good solid grasp on what you believe. Your gift of at least $50, I'll send you the 21 questions award-winning DVD set. And then if you'll add another $25, a gift of at least $75, you get the amazing Truth for a New Generation t-shirt, Better Living Through Apologetics. On the back is the Truth for a New Generation logo. TNG, Truth for a New Generation. You know, you can give securely online at my website, which is alexmcfarland.com. You can write to us, P.O. Box 485, Pleasant Garden, North Carolina, 27313. God bless you. Thanks for watching, and we hope you've opened your life to the God who's revealed himself to this world.